This one's fun. This was a piece I did for kink night at the Eagle,
Oh yeah.
and the kink
Okay,
theme was
hold on. Stand
bondage.
wherever you're gonna be.
Okay.
And you want me on timekeeper, right?
Yeah.
So the
Hold
number,
Yeah.
He's gonna give you a 10 minutes left, 5 minutes left,
Great.
2 minutes left, 1 minute left.
great.
Okay.
Okay.
Great.
And he'll come stand by this one when he does it.
Okay.
And it's 50 minutes.
Yeah. And hold on, like if you don't go the whole 15 minutes, that's fine. It's just time cues for you to know where you're at.
Great.
Yep. So Noah, can you do a countdown and Bryson say it out here? Don't say anything after 3, just fingers. And stand over here so he sees you. You see the prompter?
Yes.
Okay.
Everyone applause after I say Chris Steele.
You got it.
Loud.
Ready?
Yes.
Yeah, everyone get ready to clap.
7, 6, 5, 4.
Hello, and I'm Holden Aguirre. Welcome to Camp Out, where each week I interview local drag performers about fashion design and aesthetics. Today's guest is a trans femme performance artist of many mediums, but is best known across the Bay Area for their award-winning alter ego, Polyamber Ross. Please help me welcome Chris Steele to the studio. Welcome.
Hey, thank you for having me. Happy to be here.
Thank you so much for being here. I'm so excited to talk to you about your aesthetic and your drag fashion.
Me too, because there's nothing a drag queen likes more than talking about herself. So thank you for the opportunity.
Great. So let's start off. Just tell me how you got into drag and what inspired you.
Oh yeah. I mean, drag for me for a long time felt like something that I loved but wasn't able to do because I'm a theater artist and the times conflict. But when I moved to San Francisco, you got to make the rent however you can, and you also find ways to sort of bring creativity into all aspects of your life. So I met local drag performers who were doing incredible stuff that I didn't think could be drag beyond sort of the RuPaul scope of things, that felt like performance art or felt like community building. And I was like, oh, that actually inspires me more than just looking pretty and standing around. Yeah.
So tell me about Polyamber Ross and how you came up with that persona and who are they?
Yeah, so Polly, I like to say, is an undead housewife living her best afterlife. I've always been inspired by horror movies. I'm a fanatic. I love literally all of them. And I wanted something that could be spooky but flexible enough to contain sort of whatever I want. Also, I'm a political activist and a trans person, and so I wanted those to be elements of Polly. Her name is a pun, but only if you say it fast enough. And I wanted it to be both a name that you could find on like a dead Victorian woman's tombstone and also something that was a funny pun.
That's great. So you said you were inspired a lot by horror movies. You said that you also, this is a design from Bride of Frankenstein?
Yeah, so
Okay.
a lot of the drag that I do is inspired by horror films. This one is like a pretty straight up cosplay piece from the Bride of Frankenstein. She has this giant, when she wakes up from the table, she
Yeah.
has this giant white gown that sort of drapes all over the place with her.
Yeah.
So I made it as like a reveal coat
Okay.
and a bunch of snaps down the middle, and this is a ton of yardage of random white fabric that I got as cheap as I could.
That's amazing.
And then underneath I built this piece, which I wanted to look a little bit like she was stitched together out of different skin tones, but didn't want it to feel like I was stitched together out of different ethnicities. So I picked colors that felt like both real and cartoon, so that the drag felt elevated. And that took like 2 entire TV series to just sort of like stitch all the teeny tiny pieces together evenly.
So were you like, did you watch the movie a lot to get inspiration, or did you just like?
Oh yeah, I mean the movie,
Yeah.
but also like looking at people's illustrations of her online and ways they imagined her body could look like.
Yeah.
Because we don't get to see her body in the film. She's only in it for 3 minutes.
Yeah.
So it's both film research and a little bit of imagination.
This is gorgeous.
Thanks.
How did you learn how to sew?
I learned how to sew in college when I was studying theater. We learned all of the different sort of production aspects of theater, which was lovely, but I didn't have time in my schedule or in my budget to stay and study more costuming. So it wasn't until the pandemic that I actually personally invested in being like, no, this is a skill I want to learn how to do. It'll elevate my artistry and it'll make me feel more seen. So I took online classes in the city and I bought a nice sewing machine and I started learning how to pattern things because the sewing is one part, but really it's taking math and making the pattern for a garment that is really difficult and requires the learning.
So do you design every outfit you wear, or do you design for other drag queens or performers?
I
rather?
do design for other artists as well. I don't design everything for myself because honestly, who has the time? But I design specialty things that I feel like I can't find. Because often with drag, you're dealing with exaggerated proportions. Polly is a well-endowed lady. And so a lot of the garments that you would find off the rack or shopping at vintage stores just won't fit anymore. The stuff that's left over is usually pretty tiny. So I make a lot of my costumes because that's the only way I can get it to fit my silhouette. And the things I don't make, I usually either inherit from other drag artists or buy from other queer makers who make things for drag.
And you said that you brought some stuff in these are different eras. So this is Bride of Frankenstein from the 20s.
Yep.
And then this is, can you describe this look for
Yeah, of
me?
course. So this one was built for a performance at a leather bar. And I knew I wanted to do something that you wouldn't expect to see at a queer leather bar. So it's this full satin, sort of Erte inspired 30s draped gown.
Yeah.
And the piece has me going around the bar, picking out people from the audience. And what's normally a train and hangs on my wrists becomes clipped to people's leather collars. So then I have people carry my train for the rest of the number.
Oh, wow. Dom Queen.
Yeah. I mean, drag is an immersive art form. So each of the pieces that I brought, I'm constantly thinking of how they're going to interact directly with the audience.
Yeah.
And how it's not just a piece of sort of standing fashion, it's performance wear.
Yeah.
So there's something that's got to be larger than life about it.
How long did this piece take for you to make?
This piece only took me a day to make.
And you said it was you were talking earlier about it being a bias cut?
Yeah. So anytime that you build something like this that has a drape, you want to cut something on the bias, which is a diagonal, because otherwise it gets crinkly and doesn't look right. It was my first ever bias patterned gown and my first time ever doing a cowl. I'm pretty proud of how it turned out from making it up on the fly.
It's gorgeous.
Thanks. The fabric does a lot of heavy lifting on this one.
So how many performances do you do, say, like, in a week?
It depends on whether I'm in a theater show or not, but I, at the height of my drag, am running 9 different shows across the city and performing at least 3 times a week. When I'm in a theater show, I still try to perform at least once a week just because I get the itch and need to satisfy it.
Yeah.
The busiest I've ever been was probably pre-pandemic when there were a lot more local drag shows. It's getting back to that level, but like I have done multiple shows. Like I've done 3 shows in one day before, or I've done like a show every single day of the week. And then you kind of need a week to just decompress and not do anything ever again.
Yeah. So what are you working on currently?
Currently, I am working towards restarting an all-trans drag show that we did in the Castro that's moving to a new bar called In Transit. I'm also performing in a world premiere trans rock superhero opera that I helped with the wig wardrobe for. And yeah, taking time to sort of plan. When I took a pause from drag to do the rock opera, I realized I had sort of run out of new garments. So right now I'm in the space where I just get to plan new things I want to make and start looking through my various bins of fabric to see what'll work for them.
So do you oftentimes reuse a lot of fabrics or just find fabrics and you're like, I'm going to make something out of this?
Oh yeah, so like, for example, that third piece that I brought, there's this one tiny little fabric store hiding in the Richmond, and they never have a guaranteed selection, but they had this dot embroidered taffeta, and I saw it and was like, I don't know what I want to make with this, but I know it has to be something. So I bought a bunch of yardage, and it turned into this sort of 3-piece 1950s, 1960s housewife with like a reveal wrap skirt and a non-stretch little bodysuit with a Peter Pan collar and a bolero that I made out of all the rest of the fabric.
That's so amazing.
It's hard to not waste when you're making drag because you use a lot, but I try very hard to be like, if I'm gonna buy fabric, I wanna use every little bit of it.
Do you remember the number that you performed in? Have you used this many times?
Oh yeah. I mean, it's shown up as me doing Audrey from Little Shop. It's shown up as me doing like a weird 1950s housewife performance number to a Banks song. Like once you build something like this that's not number specific, you kind of realize that you're building a repertoire of performance and see which characters would wear it.
Yeah. So you mentioned earlier also too that you're a political activist. How does your activism show up in your drag?
Oh, yeah. I mean, so I think the best drag has political messages in it. Like, drag is a subversive art form. And anytime you're doing something subversive and you're intentionally speaking out about the mainstream or about oppression, that's a political act. As a trans person, especially now in this country, living is a political act. So anytime I get on stage, especially when I'm hosting and talking on the microphone, I'm saying what the first thing that comes to my mind is, and usually that's truths about the world we live in and how we all feel, and a lot of it ends up being political. And just like creating drag itself, going out into the world, being able to walk down the street, exaggerating gender and creating that larger than life space often makes other people feel more welcome to do so in their own small way. And I think that's a quiet but really important political act, especially in San Francisco.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people oftentimes don't realize that this exaggerated gender is often, performed through clothing.
Yeah.
So that's a really important aspect of being a drag performer. What would you say is the most important aspect to being a successful drag performer?
Yeah, I come from theater training, so I come from a world where you're focused on what's repeatable and sustainable for you. And I think that's really important for drag artists that don't come from a trained art background, is that do things that are healthy for your body, still stretch, still prepare, do things that engage the audience, because it's a community art form. You can do drag alone in a room, but is it really drag unless someone's watching and participating, especially when you want the dollar bills? So do things that are sustainable, that you can repeat, do things that you can engage with an audience with, and also, if you don't enjoy it, don't do it. Like, drag, I like to say, at its best, is an expensive hobby that maybe pays for itself. And so if you're not gonna be making buku bucks doing it anyway, make sure that the things you do are things that you love. Drag is a really open receptacle, so I've done numbers with balloon animals because I used to do those as a kid. I've done numbers with magic tricks. Anything that you love, you can find a way to put it into drag and make art out of it.
Do you say that you have maybe like who would your style icon be, or like a fashion icon for you be?
I am drawn to like the high eras of horror, so like Victorian era Gothic storytelling, like the 1930s, all of the old black and white monster movies and those beautiful bias draped gowns from all of those B-side films, and the 1970s. I really love a lot of the way this sort of like flow and repurposing and loud textures, lace, especially San Francisco history. Gunny Sacks is like one of my favorite brands. But beyond that, I feel like fashion for me in drag also is an element of character. I'm a theater performer, so normally I come up with a number and the concept, and then I'm like, okay, so how do I make that not look pedestrian? How do I make it feel like a fashion moment while telling a very human story?
So what comes first for you? Like, do you hear a song? Like, is there, what gives you that inspiration to like sketch out an outfit, or do you sketch? Or?
I think it's been different for every outfit I've made. So like this one, for example, I knew I wanted to make something The Bride of Frankenstein. I love that movie. I love that character, especially as a trans femme. It resonates with me. So I was like, I want to make my Bride of Frankenstein. That I knew from the beginning. This one came from, I have a prompt, bondage night. How am I going to make something that people won't expect that still fits Polly's aesthetic and fits into this world? So that was concept first and then outfit. And that last one is more, I just knew that I wanted to make something pretty out of that fabric. And sometimes it's just scrolling through my Pinterest boards or my Instagram saves and being like, what have I not used as inspiration yet?
Yeah.
What have I not pulled from?
You gotta love Pinterest and Instagram.
Honestly, what else would I do with my exhausted mornings but doom scroll?
Well, thank you so much, Chris, for being here and sharing your artistry and your wonderful clothing. And I will see y'all next time. Thanks.